June 16, 1943, 6:12 a.m., RAF Nethervaughan, England. Major John Jock Campbell stood on the airfield tarmac, his boots crunching on frost-covered grass. Ahead, a modified Valentine tank sat beneath a massive glider, its steel hull painted olive drab, its tracks folded neatly against its sides. This was the AV-38 Tetrarch flying tank, Britain's most audacious airborne weapon project. Campbell adjusted his goggles, watching his ground crew secure the tank to the glider's floor. At 6:30 a.m., the glider was towed into the sky by a Halifax bomber. Campbell climbed into a chase plane, his heart racing. Would the tank survive the flight? Could it land safely and fight? For Britain's paratroopers, trapped behind enemy lines without heavy armor, the answer would mean the difference between victory and defeat. The story of Britain's flying tank begins in 1941, when the British Army faced a bitter reality. Its paratroopers were defenseless against enemy armor. During the Battle of Crete that year, German paratroopers had seized the island using gliders and parachutes. But British paratroopers, sent to counterattack, had no tanks or anti-tank weapons. They were cut down by German Panzer II and III tanks, suffering 15,000 casualties. The lesson was clear. Airborne forces needed armor to survive, but how to get tanks to them? Parachutes couldn't carry the weight of a tank. Cargo planes were too slow and vulnerable to enemy fighters. The only solution, dreamed up by the British Army's Royal Engineers, was to attach wings to a tank, to turn it into a glider-borne weapon that could land with paratroopers and fight immediately. The man tasked with leading the project was Major General Percy Hobart, a brilliant but controversial armor specialist. Hobart had spent years advocating for light tanks that could be deployed quickly, and he saw the flying tank as the ultimate extension of that idea. In 1941, he convinced the War Office to fund a prototype, allocating £150,000, equivalent to £8 million a day, and assigning a team of 200 engineers from Vickers Armstrong, Britain's leading tank manufacturer. The goal was simple: modify an existing light tank to fit inside a glider, survive a rough landing, and be ready to fight within 10 minutes of touching down. The first challenge was choosing the right tank. The British Army had several light tank models, but most were too heavy or too large for existing gliders. The Valentine tank, weighing 16 tons, was too heavy. The Matilda II, at 26 tons, was impossible. The only viable option was the Tetrarch, officially designated the A.17, a light tank weighing just 7.6 tons, with a 2-pounder gun and 2 machine guns. The Tetrarch was small, 14 feet long, 7 feet wide, and fast, 30 miles per hour on roads, but it had flaws. Its armor was thin, just 14 millimeters thick at the front, and its gun was ineffective against German medium tanks. Still, it was the only tank light enough to fly. Hobart's team began modifying the Tetrarch in early 1942. The first step was reducing weight further. They removed the tank's rear fuel tank, cutting capacity from 60 gallons to 30. They replaced the steel tracks with lighter aluminum ones, shaving 500 pounds off the total weight. They also removed non-essential components: the radio operator's seat, a spare tire, and several tools. The final weight came in at 7.2 tons, just light enough for the new Hamilcar glider, a massive cargo glider being built by General Aircraft Limited. Next came the landing system. A tank's tracks are designed for roads and fields, not glider landings. The team added a set of skids to the Tetrarch's hull, Steel plates 6 feet long, mounted beneath the tracks. These skids would absorb the impact of landing, preventing the tank from tipping over. They also reinforced the tank's suspension, adding extra springs to handle the jolt of hitting the ground at 60 miles per hour. To make the tank fit inside the Hamilcar glider, the team folded the Tetrarch's tracks upward against its hull, using hydraulic rams activated by the tank's engine. When the glider landed, the tracks would be lowered in 90 seconds, turning the flying tank back into a fighting one. The Hamilcar glider was equally critical to the project. Built to carry the Tetrarch, it was 68 feet long, 30 feet wide, and had a wingspan of 110 feet, twice the size of any glider Britain had built before. Its fuselage was made of wood and canvas, with a steel frame to support the tank's weight. The glider's landing gear was reinforced with rubber shocks, and it had a large cargo door at the rear that could be opened mid-flight to drop supplies, or, in this case, to roll the tank out after landing. The Hamilcar was towed by a Halifax or Sterling bomber, and it could glide 20 miles from its tow plane before landing. By March 1942, the first modified Tetrarch, renamed the AV-38 Flying Tetrarch, was ready for ground tests. The team drove it onto a mock glider floor at Vickers Armstrong's factory in Newcastle, checking if it fit and if the tracks could fold and unfold smoothly. The test went well, but there was a new problem. The Hamilcar glider wasn't ready. General Aircraft Limited was behind schedule, struggling to source wood for the fuselage and steel for the frame. Hobart's team was forced to wait, using the time to refine the tank's design. They added a small winch to the tank's front, so it could pull itself out of the glider if the landing gear failed. They also upgraded the 2-pounder gun to fire armor-piercing rounds, hoping to give a better chance against German tanks. The first flight test finally took place on February 27, 1943, at RAF Nedervan. The Hamilcar glider, with the flying Tetrarch secured inside, was towed into the sky by a Halifax bomber. The pilot of the glider, Flight Lieutenant David Morgan, later recalled the takeoff as nerve-wracking. Every bump in the air made me worry the tank would shift. For 45 minutes, the glider climbed to 8,000 feet, then glided down to a field 15 miles away. Morgan landed smoothly, and ground crews rushed to the glider. The tank was intact. When the crew inside activated the hydraulic rams, the tracks unfolded perfectly. The flying Tetrarch drove out of the glider and onto the field, its engine roaring. The test was a success, but the War Office remained skeptical. One senior officer wrote in a report, "It's a clever trick, but can it fight? A tank that flies is still a tank within armor and a weak gun." Hobart's team pressed on, conducting more flight tests throughout spring 1943. In April, they tested the flying Tetrarch's ability to land on rough terrain, simulating the fields of France or Germany. The glider touched down in a plowed field, bouncing twice before coming to a stop. The tank skids absorbed most of the impact, and it drove out without damage. In May, they tested the tank's combat readiness. After landing, the crew fired the 2-pounder gun at a target 500 yards away, hitting it on the first shot. The War Office began to warm to the idea, ordering 20 flying Tetrarchs and 40 Hamilcar gliders for operational use. But the project faced a new threat: the German flying tank rumors. In 1943, British intelligence reported that Germany was developing its own glider-borne tank, the Panzerjäger glider, which could carry a Panzer II tank. The report was later proven false, but it spurred the British to accelerate their project. By June 1943, the 1st Operational Unit, the 6th Airborne Armored Reconnaissance Regiment, was formed, trained to use the Flying Tetrarch in combat. The regiment's soldiers, all volunteers, spent weeks practicing landings and tank drills, learning to work with paratroopers to secure bridges and towns. The first combat deployment of the Flying Tetrarch was scheduled for July 10, 1943, during the Allied invasion of Sicily, codenamed Operation Husky. The plan was bold. 12 Flying Tetrarchs would be towed into Sicily by Halifax bombers, landing with the 1st Airborne Division to seize the town of Primosole Bridge. The bridge was critical. It spanned the Samito River, and controlling it would allow Allied tanks to advance inland. But disaster struck on July 9th. The night before the invasion, a storm hit the Mediterranean, tossing the gliders around like toys. 6 gliders crashed into the sea, killing all crew and destroying their tanks. 3 more were shot down by German anti-aircraft guns. Only 3 Flying Tetrarchs made it to Sicily, but they landed 5 miles from bridge in a minefield. 1 tank hit a mine and exploded. The other 2 were disabled by German mortar fire. The mission was a failure. If you found this interesting, get a thumbs up to show your support. Drop a wonderful in the comments to let me know you're still with me. Stick around till the end, because I'll reveal 3 mind-blowing facts you won't want to miss. Haven't followed yet? Hit that follow button so you won't miss our next deep dive. Trust me, the best is yet to come. The Sicily disaster forced the War Office to rethink the Flying Tetrarch. Critics argued that the tank was too fragile, the glider too vulnerable, and the whole concept a waste of resources. Hobart defended the project, pointing out that the storm and minefield were unexpected obstacles, not flaws in the design. He convinced the War Office to give the Flying Tetrarch one more chance, this time in a smaller, less risky operation. In September 1943, the Flying Tetrarch was deployed to Italy, supporting the 8th Army's advance up the Italian peninsula. This time, the gliders landed behind German lines near the town of Salerno, carrying 4 Flying Tetrarchs and a company of paratroopers. The landing was smooth, and the tanks drove out of the gliders without damage. They immediately engaged a German infantry unit, using their machine guns to clear a path for the paratroopers. For 3 days, the Flying Tetrarchs fought alongside the paratroopers, destroying 2 German machine gun nests and a supply truck. But on the 4th day, a German Panzer IV tank appeared. The Flying Tetrarchs fired their 2-pounded guns, but the rounds bounced off the Panzer's armor. 1 Flying Tetrarch was destroyed by a direct hit. The other 3 were forced to retreat. The paratroopers held the town, but the Flying Tetrarchs had proven they couldn't stand up to German medium tanks. By late 1943, the writing was on the wall for the Flying Tetrarch. The British Army had begun developing a new anti-tank weapon, the PIT Projector Infantry Anti-Tank, which was light enough for paratroopers to carry. The PIT could penetrate 75 millimeters of armor, enough to destroy a Panzer IV, and it didn't require a glider or a tank. The War Office canceled further production of the Flying Tetrarch in November 1943, ordering the remaining 15 tanks to be used for training. Hobart was devastated. He later wrote in his memoir, "The flying tank was not a failure of design. It was a failure of timing. We built it for a problem that was solved by a simpler weapon, But the project's legacy didn't end there. Declassified War Office documents, released in 1975, reveal that the flying Tetrarch influenced the design of Britain's post-war airborne vehicles. The lessons learned about glider-borne cargo, how to secure heavy equipment, how to absorb landing impacts, how to quickly deploy weapons, were used to develop the Hastings cargo plane, which could carry light tanks in the 1950s. The folded track design was adapted for Britain's first armored personnel carrier, the Saracen, which would be airlifted by cargo planes. And the idea of airborne armor lived on in 1956 during the Suez Crisis. British paratroopers used modified Centurion tanks, airlifted by C-130 Hercules planes, to secure the Suez Canal. The flying Tetrarch also had an unexpected impact on German military thinking. In 1944, captured German documents revealed that the Wehrmacht had studied reports of the British flying tank and begun its own small-scale project, the Schwimmwagen MIT Flugel, floating car with wings, though it was never completed. The Germans recognized the value of airborne armor, even if they couldn't replicate Britain's design. For the engineers who built the flying Tetrarch, the project was a source of pride. Many went on to work on Britain's post-war aviation and armor projects, including the Harrier jump jet and the Challenger tank. One engineer, Arthur Lowe, later said, "We knew it was a long shot, but it was worth it. We proved that a tank could fly, and that's something no one else had done." The surviving flying Tetrarchs were scattered across Britain after the war. One was sent to the Imperial War Museum in London, where it was displayed as part of an exhibit on weird and wonderful World War II weapons. Another was used as a gate guardian at RAF Nethervon, the airfield where it had made its first flight. A third was donated to Canadian War Museum in Ottawa, a gift from Britain to honor Canadian paratroopers who had trained with the flying tank. Today, the flying Tetrarch is mostly forgotten by the general public. It's overshadowed by more famous World War II weapons, the Spitfire, the Lancaster bomber, the Churchill tank. But among military historians and armor enthusiasts, it's recognized as a pivotal moment in airborne warfare. It was the first time a tank was designed to be carried by a glider and deployed with paratroopers. It proved that airborne forces could have armor support, and that Britain was willing to take bold risks to win the war. The story of Britain's flying tank also raises important questions about military innovation. Is it better to pursue a ridiculous idea that could change the war, or to stick with proven weapons? The flying Tetrarch was never a perfect weapon. It was too light, too slow, too weak against enemy tanks. But it was a step forward. It showed that airborne forces didn't have to be defenseless. It paved the way for the armored airborne vehicles that are standard in modern militaries today. On a summer day in 1943, Major Jock Campbell watched a flying Tetrarch take to the sky. He didn't know then that the tank would never live up to its promise, that it would be canceled after just 2 combat deployments. But he did know that it was a symbol of Britain's ingenuity, a weapon built not by a superpower with unlimited resources, but by a nation fighting for its survival. As he wrote in his diary that night, "It may not win the war, but it shows we're not ready to give up. And in this war, that's half the battle." The flying Tetrarch was a failure in many ways. It didn't destroy enemy tanks. It didn't turn the tide of any battle. It didn't become the weapon Britain's paratroopers needed. But it was a success in one crucial way. It dared to be different. It proved that even the most absurd idea, attaching wings to a tank, could be made real. And in World War II, when Britain faced an enemy with better weapons and more soldiers, that kind of daring was sometimes the only advantage it had. Today, the AV-38 Flying Tetrarch at the Imperial War Museum sits quietly in a corner, its paint faded, its tracks folded. Most visitors walk past it, drawn to the larger, more famous tanks nearby. But for those who stop to read its plaque, to learn its story, it's a reminder of a time when Britain's engineers and soldiers dreamed big. It's a reminder that even the ridiculous can be real. And it's a reminder that in war, innovation isn't just about building better weapons. It's about having the courage to try something new. Britain's flying tank may have been forgotten, but its legacy lives on. Every time a modern paratrooper deploys with an armored vehicle, every time a glider or cargo plane carries heavy weapons into battle, we see a little bit of the flying Tetrarch. It was a weapon ahead of its time, born into a war that couldn't wait for perfection. And for that, it deserves to be remembered, not as a failure, but as a bold step toward the future of warfare.